Hey lady, welcome to the Postpartum on Purpose podcast. If we haven't met, my name is Anne Marie and I'm wife to James and mom to 4 beautiful kids, ranging from 9 down to 1 with one on the way. My hope is to help other women experience postpartum as a time of grit, growth, and grace. This is episode 41. Hi lady, how are ya? Let's talk this week about what to do when your postpartum experience does not look like that of the influencers that you follow on social media or the people that you know, even if they're your family members. And I don't just mean if you're following what I'll call aspirational influencers, but I just mean somebody else on social media or that you know who appears to be experiencing postpartum better or differently than you. And I will confess to you that some of this episode is to me as well, but it's to me during pregnancy, and here's why it came about. Sometimes we can do the things that we know will help us in postpartum or in pregnancy, in my case right now. We know that they're good things to do, especially good behaviors, good practices for our own health, and yet we can experience challenges. And we can be taken off guard because we expected that the things we were doing were going to be enough to prevent things from happening or to make things go well. And that may just not be the case. That may just not be our experience. We may do all the things that we can to plan for postpartum to go well. We may put our support system in place. We may get the grandma tribe going and a meal train planned, etc., etc., etc. And then breastfeeding is really hard. Or our hormones seem to be going crazy and make it really hard to function. Or we suffer from mastitis, or a child is in the NICU and maybe we received a diagnosis that we didn't expect. All sorts of things could explain why your postpartum doesn't look like what you planned for or isn't panning out, even though you prepared as best you could. In my experience right now, being almost 31 weeks pregnant, I have had building over the last 6 weeks in particular, just several different things, a convergence of different things. One of them is right hip and lower back pain. And then the other is learning that you can get more, let's try that again, that you can get varicose veins not just in your legs. You can also get them where the baby comes out. And if you do, they will be very uncomfortable. I don't mean unbearable, but very uncomfortable. And I've just been taken aback and taken by surprise by these things because I've been working out. And I've had reasonable weight gain. Not excessive, but reasonable. And I'm eating more healthfully now. Not as healthfully as I could, but certainly more healthfully than I was in previous pregnancies. So I'm doing the things. If you ever watched Matt Walsh's What is the Woman documentary, there's a song in there. And it's like, do the work, do the work. I have been doing the work. I've been doing the work. And yet really have just felt rough. Not all of the time, but in particular in the last week, things just came to a head. And so I'll get into a little bit some of what I'm doing to address those things, in case some of it's relevant to you, but also just as the rest of the story. And I thought it might be helpful to address this idea that sometimes what we prepare for isn't what we get, and maybe how we could consider responding to that. Because we do have options in how we respond, even if what we really just want to do is whine and be sad and miserable and feel sorry for ourselves, which are all things that I have I have an affinity for. I am sympathetic to all of those things. I engage in all of those things at different times. But don't think, of course, that those are the best options. So, number one point or principle for today is that you and I are not locked into becoming a victim to our circumstances. We may be surprised, we may be taken off guard or taken aback at first, but neither you nor I have to become victims to our circumstances. All right, so something I want to propose is when you realize or just experience that things aren't going the way you planned, I'd love for you to talk to someone. And if I may be so specific, I would encourage you to be specific or choosy or picky in who you talk to. I chose to talk to my sister because she is ahead of me in pregnancy, but understands that pregnancy can be uncomfortable. And I just wanted someone to commiserate with me. So I'd love for you to choose someone to talk to who will commiserate with you without judging or telling you what you need to do, prescribing anything necessarily for you. Maybe they say, I've experienced the same thing that you have, and this is what was helpful to me, but not somebody who's going to try to fix your problem for you, well intentioned as that may be. So talk to someone. Now, I didn't just talk to my sister. I also talked to my husband, not because I necessarily thought he was going to have some great ideas or sympathize from an insider perspective, we'll say, but because I know he loves me and wants to support me, and also as a way of explaining to him, hey, I'm struggling with this right now, so if some of my answers are snappy sometimes or I'm a little off, it's because these are the things that I'm experiencing. And I know that what hurts my heart hurts his heart, and he wants to share that burden with me. So I chose to talk to both of them. But that's not all. I also chose to talk to my OB about what I was experiencing and a pelvic floor physical therapist who was able to make some good suggestions. And granted, I'm only a week into trying some of these different things and still need to implement a couple of the things like wearing compression shorts and leggings, which if you ever experience, they're called vulvar varicosities. That's what you call varicose veins in the vaginal area, at least during pregnancy. If you ever experience them, you're supposed to get compression leggings and or shorts. And the ones that were recommended to me by a friend are on their way from Australia and are exorbitantly expensive, but free shipping. So that's completely as an aside. But let's head back to the main point, Anne-Marie. The main point is talking to someone can be helpful. Talking to someone who actually can commiserate with you rather than trying to tell you what to do or fix your problem for you is great. And then talking to someone who can make professional or clinical recommendations that will help you is even better. And I want to address something here. Right here. I think this is a good spot to put this. You may be thinking, as I have plenty of times in the past, I just need to offer this up. Or if only I trusted God more, then X, Y, or Z, I would handle it better. I would tolerate it better. I would have a better response to whatever this thing is. I used to think, if only I trusted God more, ... especially with things related to mental health, that it represented a lack of trust or a lack of trust that God would help me, essentially, if I was going to counseling or trying something else, that I didn't believe that he was powerful enough to fix what was wrong with my emotions or mental health. That is one perspective. I think it has some limitations. I think, and I have found, that everybody doesn't trust God enough. Of course. But when we're asking for help, we are saying, I don't have the skill set and or I don't have the mindset that I need to be able to trust God. So what that looks like in this situation, right? I don't want to be unclear or confusing here, so I hope you're able to follow what I'm saying. What in this situation, I could say, well, I could just offer up this hip and lower back pain that I'm having, right? I could say that, for the good of humanity, or maybe a very specific thing or person. But recognizing that I'm a human being and that I don't have all the skills and I don't have all the mindset to cope with things as well as I could. One, I think I think we have an obligation to alleviate suffering where we can, including our own, unless we have very specifically discerned that God is asking us to bear something rather than to seek to make it go away or to get better. I think we have obligations to the people around us, and those obligations should lead us to get help in the ways that we can. But let's say that it was a more emotional thing in nature that I was experiencing. When I've been going to this therapist, this ERP, exposure and response prevention therapist for obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD, when I went to the OCD ERP therapist, he was saying something along these very same lines. Like, this is part of OCD, is not trusting. But when we recognize that we don't have the capacity to trust, we don't have the skills in place to trust, or the mindset in place to trust, I believe it is incumbent on us to then go and get the help we need to get closer to doing that. Now, do I believe any human being is capable of fully and completely trusting in God in every situation all the time? No, because we are living in a fallen world and we ourselves have a tendency to sin and just a tendency to not be perfect. Not even from sin, but just like we have vulnerabilities and weaknesses and flaws and wounds and experiences and circumstances that impact our ability to do the best that we can, to behave in the best way that we can. So, all of that simply to say, I think, one, that nobody trusts God the way that they ought, but that it makes every kind of sense to seek help, to learn to cope better with the struggles in our lives so that we can hear his voice in our hearts, so that we can engage more meaningfully with the world around us, so that we can be more present to the people and responsibilities that are in front of us, which are his will for us in the present moment. In the present moment, we always find his will. So if that's something that's ever struck you, well, I don't want to go and seek out this therapy or this counseling or trying to get help in X, Y, or Z way. I just want to offer it up. I think we have a duty, a responsibility to learn the skills, to learn the mindset that we need to remove suffering as much as possible. But even when we cannot altogether remove the suffering, for instance, I'll give the example of if your child is in the NICU. Well, you can't just wish that away. But perhaps you can get help, whether it's professional or from a support system or etc. Perhaps you can seek help, not be isolated, not be shut down, but to go out of yourself and to seek help, a shift in mindset, new skills. The skill might be the skill of asking for help, but to seek the growth in that opportunity, and that directly involves asking for help. It directly involves not just sitting and staying where you are, doing what you've always done. I hope that's not too tangential. I think it's related. I know it affects me at different times and in different ways. Should I just kind of wait something out, or when ought I to get help? Yeah, I think that's probably enough. I think that's probably enough on that point. Something else that I found that has really impacted me this week, and I didn't realize it was impacting me so much until it didn't, was a belief that I had. It was a lie, but at the time I just knew it was a belief that all of the things I was experiencing were because I am now the ripe old age of 35. And that being pregnant at 35, I guess this is just how it is. And the next thing I told myself based on that was that if I had any future pregnancies, they would be even worse because I'll be older. And then I was talking to my OB yesterday, and she has 6 children herself. And she said that the pregnancy most like the one I'm describing for her was number 4. And spoiler alert, of course, right? 2 more children came after that. And she was telling me that while that had been a difficult pregnancy, she then had 2 more pregnancies that were not like that. And just the idea, just a suggestion, the possibility that this is not a 1 + 1 = 2 scenario, that just because these things are difficult in this pregnancy right now does not mean they are definitely related to my age, and therefore does not mean that every pregnancy or any pregnancy after this would go the same way, would follow the same path. So I don't know what in your current situation that's hard. In your experience of postpartum that's hard. I don't know what in there is getting muddied, or your ability to cope with it is getting muddied by a false belief like the ones that I held, unknowingly, of course, not maliciously, but unknowingly. I just assumed this makes sense to me. This is because I'm getting older, and therefore, dot, dot, dot. I don't know what beliefs are muddying up the waters for you, but I would just suggest that maybe you hold that idea loosely, the possibility that there is something that feels inevitable or that you think is inevitable, and perhaps it's not. Perhaps it's not. Something else that's been helpful, we're getting kind of to the end here. I don't have a ton of thoughts on this, but I got a couple. Something else that's been helpful is to be grateful where I can. Now, I don't mean to pretend that the hip and low back pain aren't there. I don't mean to pretend that the varicosity symptoms are not there. They are, and I acknowledge them when it's appropriate and with the appropriate people. Also, at the same time, simultaneously, in tandem, those are all the things I can think of that are the same. I can't even think of what the word is for that. At the same time, to be grateful for what is going well is a great gift. To be grateful for what is going well is a great gift. At the same time that I am experiencing all of these different symptoms to varying degrees every day, and to varying degrees of interference with what I would like to do in the course of a day, there is much that is going very well. And there are things that I'm not experiencing. Part of all of the pressure that's causing the discomfort with the varicosities is that my belly, having done this 5 times full term, or getting to full term, and then once very briefly with Gabriella, my belly, having done this so many times, is not up in my lungs. It is already low. It has never been high, as best I can tell. But that means it's not hard for me to breathe. I am not short of breath. And something I don't believe is necessarily related to that, but for which I can be very grateful, is that I am sleeping really well at night. Generally speaking, I am not waking up with the terrible round ligament pain that I have had in previous pregnancies, especially in the middle of the night. Waking up realizing I laid on one side and rolling over is very, very painful. So those things aren't happening right now. And at the same time that I can feel frustrated or disappointed or just notice the things that are hard, I can also be grateful for the things that are going well or that have been alleviated, even if they're not necessarily related, but just happening at the same time. The last thing I'll suggest is, as much as possible, lady, to be in the present moment and to avoid the tendency, ask me how I know, to rely on social media or the internet as a distraction, because it is a transient distraction that cannot satisfy for long. But in the present moment, there can be tiny consolations, tiny distractions, but I think the right kind of distraction, because they're bringing us back to reality and away from a future in which, to go with a false belief that I had, in which everything is terrible and fixed and inevitable. Being in the present moment and noticing what's around us, especially if we have an older child or children who are asking for our attention in some way, being present to the things and people around us can be a great gift, and it can help us to take the experience of the day one day at a time, rather than in advance anticipating the accumulation of terrible things. Another thing I told my husband was, I cannot do this for 9 more weeks. Nobody has asked me to do that today. The things that I'm pursuing in pelvic floor physical therapy and the suggestions she's made, not just things in the therapy, but the suggestions she's made tangentially to that, like the compression stockings and things I'm supposed to do at home, those really ought to make a difference. And I'm going to go see a chiropractor and hopefully get a massage through the chiropractic office, because they have a masseuse there as well, in the next couple of weeks. And I'll probably schedule those things, I don't know how often, before the baby comes. But so I am taking those steps. I have good reason to think that this is not going to be the status quo for the next 9 weeks, because I can change. I can grow. To go back to the tagline of grit, growth, and grace, yes, I can show grit until these different improvements take shape, until they take effect. I can ask for the grace to bear them patiently until that occurs, and to be kind with my family in the meantime. But there can also be the growth of, yes, I was in pain before, but I am in less pain or no pain now. All of those things, lady, I hope can offer you some consolation. Is that the right word? I hope they can offer you something when you are going through a postpartum that is turning out differently than you expected, at least in the present. I'll talk to you later. Bye.